Hello to all, and welcome to this session about implementing and maintaining an Azure SQL Database project. My name is Emanuele Zanchettin. I am a data architect about SQL Server and Azure SQL Database, and also I am analyst and developer using .NET. Please excuse me for any mistake in my English. I'm studying for it. So, how many people are using Azure SQL Database? Someone, okay. What we will see in about an hour, we will see a very fast overview about how Azure SQL Database works, and then some thoughts about making a choice, some scenarios, the first publication, and then the revision or update, something about backup and restore strategies, and at the end, something about service level agreement as SLA. So we can say that the bases have not changed more or less. Using Azure SQL Database, we don't have a database. We have a logic database as a pointer to the service. Automatically, we have a cluster with free copies of the database, and automatically, the data is saved in the database using the quorum criteria. If a database goes down for like a failure, for example, or for Marfilo, as the worst case, this is the primary database. Automatically, the engine of Azure SQL Database changes the internal link to the second database and replaces the damaged database with a new database and rebuilds it immediately, and so on so far. If we need to increase the database size or improve the performance of the database, we need to scale, and we can do it with different methods. For example, the first one, called scale up, is simpler, is using a bigger database or faster database. The second one, called vertical partitioning, is dividing the tables in different databases. And the last one, called scale out or horizontal partitioning, is splitting the same table in many databases. This is the best way for a multi-tenant application. Some conclusion about what we have seen. Using scale up is all right because it's so simple to do with a control panel to change the size of the database, but it has a limit. The size of the database up to 500 gigabytes. So we can go above this limit using vertical partitioning, but in this case, we don't have foreign key across different databases, and we don't have the transaction between different databases. And at the last, about scale out or horizontal partitioning, it's embedded in Azure. But you need to do something in the schema of the database for it, and the cost of it is developing and troubleshooting a little bit harder. And this is the best way to scale using federation for example, or now we're using Elasticale. Federation will be die in September of this year, and Elasticale is the alternative. So, other conclusion is the evolution of the services. When the service started, we had a few options. And yesterday, we had more option or future. Today, we have a lot of option or future. And tomorrow, what we will have? A very, very large of option and feature to set. Do you not believe me? Try to calculate the price. Using Web and Business Edition, will be die in September also. We have two options, number of database and size of database. So now we need to use the service tier like basic, standard, or premium. But for each service tier, we need to set the performance level for each database. And to do this, we need to understand what server performance level is. With this simple table, you can see all performance level of service tier. And there is an important column called DTU as database throughput unit. It's a number, it's a simple number, but it represents the set of features of the server about the size, or about another important column is the benchmark transaction rate. This is a number of operation as a benchmark with an OLTP database. So with this value, you can have an idea of the capacity of the server. So if you need less than 60,000 operation in an hour, basic is your database, your tier, your best tier. But if you need a database of, for example, 400 gigabytes, you need to choose a premium tier. But the choice depends by your needs and your money, because you can choose premium P3 forever, no? It's fast, it's large, but it's so expensive. Premium P3 is about 700 times of basic of cost. It costs about 270 euros a month against only 4 euros a month for basic. So the difference is too large, and is useless, spend a lot of money for nothing. So the service evolves, and in my honest opinion, this is the first important evolution of the service. Federation to Elasticale. So federation will be die in September, and the engine will die, will be stopped, but the database remaining in the system as the same operation is a switch out. So the federation root will be the shard map manager to Elasticale, and the member is called shard. we have two types of shard map, by key and by range. And also 4 types of key. The concept of key is maintaining, but with this feature, we can set the performance level and service tier for each database. For example, if we have a ERP in our company and we need to manage the data of this year in a shard, we can use the key as the year. So we can choose a premium P3 service tier or performance level against the previous year using standard premium tier. So you can save a lot of money. This is a scenario of split on merge. If you have two small database, you can merge this database into a single database, or vice versa. If you have a big database and if you need to improve the performance, you can split the single database in many databases. And don't forget to create the shard of destination before make the changes. There are some commands, for example, create shard is one, or you can delete, you can create or delete or update the mapping role. But a very nice feature is to make mapping online or offline. For example, if you have a service online and your customer doesn't pay the renew of the service, the system or you can make the offline the role, so the service is unavailable for it, and then your customer pay, you can make it online, for example. So, what's your case? There are two cases. The first one is a migration of an existing project, for example, SQL Server, Sybase, Oracle, MySQL or Access, or another type of database to SQL Azure. You can do it for all feature on cloud, or to have an hybrid scenario, a part on-premise and the rest on cloud, because you can't migrate all function on cloud at the moment. For example, all feature that cloud SQL Azure not have. For example, full text search. You can use it on premise, but all also feature you can use that of cloud. Excuse me. There are other scenarios where technically you can go on cloud, but you can't. For example, in Italy, is there a law called privacy law, where you cannot make data of person, private person, in cloud. For example, sexual orientation, political, religion, or health record on cloud. But technically, you can. Okay, the logo of SQL Azure rests so, but the real name at the moment is Azure SQL Database. The second case is if you have a new project, you can think about to design it all for to have all on cloud. So now we can have the first publishing. And how to do it? We have some tools to do this. If we need to migrate the schema and the data in the same time, we can use Migration Assistant for Oracle CBase, MySQL, and Access. Also, we can use Management Studio with the backpack package or Migration Wizard as a complex project. But if you need to migrate only data in a already existing database, you can use BCP, Management Studio, SQL Data Sync, or integration services too. And if you need to migrate the schema, you can use the SQL Server Data Tool using SQL Server Management Studio, using DAC package, or Visual Studio 2012. This is a real case of migration. Very few tables, but a lot of number of rows, about 9 million, from a database, a MySQL database, using SQL Server Migration Assistant. The time required to do this was about 26 minutes using fiber. If you have a connection to internet slow, the time is so long. A demo time. For this demo, we are using AdventureWorks, and we are trying to migrate it on Azure. You see? Okay. To do this, you can use task and publish database in Azure function. This is a wizard to do this. Choosing the server of the Azure and connecting it. Okay, so go on. At the moment, it extracts the schema information. And so for this demo, I know there is an error because your case, your database, maybe have an error to go on Azure. So if you want to know what error you have, you can click on error link, and Management Studio show you the list of the error. Okay. For AdventureWorks, we have a lot of number of errors, but this is unreadable. It's so difficult to use this interface to do a migration. Excuse me. Okay, so to do this, we can use Visual Studio for the same operation. Using a new project, as database project, Visual Studio create a new empty project. You can change the name of AdventureWorks. Okay, but we need to import the schema information from the database, and to do this, we can use import function from database, choosing the database on the local SQL server. And now Visual Studio is extracting all information of the schema and build the project as a database project. So we have information about the table, view, function, area, and all information about the schema too. The simple way to try to migrate this database on Azure is using Property tab and changing the platform of destination, choosing Microsoft Azure Database, and immediately it extracts all errors we have to migrate the database. But here is so simple to manage and to correct every single point with a double click, and you can see all error in so simple mode. Some conclusion about this demo. There are a lot of features not present in Azure SQL Database and T-SQL also, but you know a more feature coming soon. So you can use documentation online to plan your migration to Azure. So if you have a feature, for example, full text search, you can set this migration of this function when on Azure is available. Okay, now we have something there, and we need to make changes on our database, for example, because the solution evolves or for bug fixing. So we need, in my advice, is to have two environments, one for text and one for production. The production is already online. You need to create another environment, get the database from production and put it into the test, try your whole process to make an update, and after, if it's all right, you can do it on production. But a best practice is to have an undo step, because during your operation, the data may be changed. So if you have a problem, and if you have an undo step, you can go back without data loss. And if you don't have an undo step, and if you have a problem, you have more or one problem, because you cannot restore a database, because sure you lost a data. To changing schema and data, the tools are the same of before, as SQL Server Management Studio for DACPAC package or Migration Wizard. For data, the same, Management Studio or Data Sync Communication Services. And for changing on the schema, Visual Studio or Management Studio. This is a real case of federation. The project is the same of before. The customer, in this case, needs to improve the performance. So the solution was to use federation. Only 3 tables on federation for about 8 million rows. And the time required to do this was about 10 minutes. Do you see something of nice? The time is about half of before. For the first step was 26 minutes for 9 million row. Now for 8 million row, only 10 minutes, because during the upload, we are scaling. Because we had more databases to do insert in parallel. In this demo, we are changing the database schema in real time, or we are try to it. So we are using Northwind database. So it's already on Azure because a very simple database, and you can try to migrate it in so fast. In this example, I'd like to add a new column in the categories table. For example, I'd like to insert SQLRally 2015 as an integer nullable. When we save this information, we save the information into the project and not into the database, the local database. So this is, we changed the schema of the project. If we go to the Azure database, the same table, we have not the column. So we can, using the function compare schema compare, and choosing the database of the Azure, and using the compare button. Now Visual Studio extract all information of the schema of the database on Azure, all information of the project, and keep the difference. And in this case, we have only one different as the new column. And now we have 2 options. The first one is to generate the script to make the change in T-SQL. So there are, here there is the statement to make the changes. Another option is to update, to make the update directly on Azure. Using the button update, the system asks, do you want to update the destination? Yes. And now in few seconds, Visual Studio changed the database on Azure SQL Database. So if we refresh the column folder, we can see the new column into database of Azure. So some conclusion about this: database architecture or database administrator or developer, don't quarrel amongst yourself, because you have sometimes you can have an overlap of operation on this, the database. An important best practice is scaling before reaching the limit, because when you're reaching the limit, you can have, for example, a space to do something on the database, or you can have resources to do something there. Another best practice is choosing a step-by-step publication, so you can go to install the new feature, the SQL Azure database, and if you have a problem, you can go back without problem. And also, to do this, planning before starting is another best practice. So we have a solution on Azure SQL Database. We have make changes on this database, and we don't not forget the backup and restore strategies, because we need to know how does what. Database, Azure SQL Database automatically make a periodical backup at least 7 days. So we have a backup full backup weekly, a differential daily, and a transaction log every 5 minutes. But it against catastrophic software and system failure. And you have an history of this backup up to 35 days using premium service tier. But you can use also restoring point or geo restore or other feature or new feature coming. If you need to manage the user data loss, you need to have a new strategy. And to do this, there is a problem. Is there a problem? So to do this, you can use SQL Data Sync to make a offline backup on your on-premise SQL server, or using import-export service, but you need an Azure blob storage where store the backpack package. So you can have an infinity number of backup and over the backup of SQL, Azure SQL Database. So, plans before starting also for backup and restore. And now about service level agreement. What is service level agreement? Is how much time the server can stay up. So the question may be, using Azure SQL Database, can I have a downtime? Sure, you can. Because the SLA of Azure is using basic standard or premium is about 99 and 99%. It's about 4 minutes of downtime for each month. And that downtime is calculated for a time over a minute of inactivity. For example, if you have a downtime of 40 seconds, for Azure SQL Database is not downtime. Some month ago, the time was 5 minutes of inactivity to have an activity, an interruption of the services. Maybe in the future, this time will be less, for maybe 1 second, and I don't know how much. Maybe reduce it. But you can have downtime of a service after the failure of the system. For example, if you are the limit of a subscription, if you are using Azure for free, you have an amount of euro or money for each month to use the whole platform. If you spend all money in the 2 days, for the rest of the month, the service is stopped until the next month. Another limit is the credit card. If you have a credit card without money or expired credit card, the service will stop it. Another case is the over quota. You have a database, a service tier, basic 2 gigabytes, and you try to insert into 5 gigabytes of data. After 2 gigabytes, it will be stopped because you don't have more spaces. You need to increase the space. And also, when you create a server of a SQL database, each server has up to 2,000 DTU. And when you are using 3 premium P3 databases in a single server, you are over 2,000 DTU unit. And also, when you try to upgrade or downgrade a service tier, and in this case, I'd like to insert the concept of the SLO as service level objective. So how much time you need the service stay up is a little different against SLA, because if you need to upgrade or downgrade, Azure can change the server where the database stays to improve the performance. And to do this, internally, it needs to migrate the database into the new server. And to do this, there is a formula, and I call it the evil formula, because we have the number of database, 5 minutes for the setup, and the size of the database for the transfer rate to migrate the old data. And if you have a database of 50 gigabyte size, you need up to 17 hours to have a full migration of your service tier and data. So if your SLO is less than SLA, it's all right. You have not problem. If SLO is equal to SLA, if you are lucky, it's all right, but maybe you have a problem. But if SLO is more than SLA, sure, you have an error, a problem. And if you wrote a SLA with your customer and you don't respect it, you can have a problem with your customer for the rule. Here there are some links to for more information about the topic, about how to change federation to elastic-scale. Now there are some steps to do manually, but coming soon a tool to make the migration from federation to elastic-scale automatically. So if you want to see a video, you can see channel 9. If you need more information about service level agreement for each service of Azure, if you need to calculate the prices of the database or the service, about the migration assistant, because if you have a database of the list, there's a SQL Server, MySQL Access, and Oracle. This is a tool designed for this migration. Some guidelines and limitations about Azure SQL Server, SQL Database. A beautiful tool called SQL Data Sync to make a synchronization between offline and online databases. And at the end, something about SQL Server backup and the restore strategies. We are at the end. Thank you for listening. I was so fast. But I know someone is tired, so I have a very, very light session. Thank you.